The city of Chicago never truly sleeps. At 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, the Caldwell Financial Tower stood like a monument to ambition, its glass walls reflecting the scattered lights of a million lives below. 40 floors up, in a corner office that cost more per square foot than most apartments in the city, Victoria Caldwell sat alone. She was 52 years old. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a precise bun. Her designer blazer hung on the back of her chair, abandoned hours ago. The woman who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals now stared at a photograph on her desk, her fingers tracing the face of a man who had been gone for 5 years. Daniel, her husband, the only person who ever made her feel like more than a balance sheet. Her phone buzzed, a text message from her daughter Emily, who lived in New York and called maybe twice a year. "Mom, you missed my birthday dinner. Again." Victoria closed her eyes. She had forgotten. Again. The IPO preparation had consumed everything, and somewhere between the SEC filings and the investor calls, her daughter had turned 28 without her. The cleaning cart rattled in the hallway. She did not look up. Janitors were invisible to people like her. They came and went like ghosts, erasing the evidence of long days and longer nights. She had never learned any of their names in 25 years of running this company. The door opened softly. A man in a gray uniform entered, pushing a cart loaded with supplies. He was younger than she expected, maybe mid-30s with dark hair and the kind of quiet focus that seemed out of place for someone mopping floors at midnight. Victoria continued typing. The quarterly projections needed adjustments. The revenue forecast had a gap she could not explain. Somewhere in these numbers was a $12 million discrepancy that kept her awake at night. The janitor worked silently, methodically. He dusted the shelves, emptied the trash, wiped down the conference table in the corner. His movements were efficient, almost surgical in their precision. A stack of papers slipped from Victoria's desk, scattering across the freshly cleaned floor. She sighed, too exhausted to bend down. The janitor knelt and gathered them. As he placed them back on her desk, his eyes moved across the top page. Just for a moment, just long enough for something to shift in his expression. Victoria finally looked at him. He was handsome in an understated way. Strong jaw, tired eyes, hands that looked like they had done harder work than pushing a mop. On his cart, barely visible beneath the cleaning supplies, sat a thick textbook. The title read, "Principles of Corporate Finance." Strange reading material for a janitor. He turned to leave. "Wait." The word escaped before Victoria could stop it. He paused at the door. "Your revenue projection on page 47, he said quietly. "It does not match the cash flow statement. There is a $12 million discrepancy. You might want to check the Q3 expense allocations." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. That discrepancy, the one she had been hunting for 3 weeks, the one her entire analytics team had missed. This man, this janitor, had spotted it in 5 seconds. "Who are you?" He smiled, just barely, a smile that carried something heavier than amusement. "Just the janitor, ma'am. Good night." The door closed behind him. Victoria sat frozen in the amber glow of her desk lamp. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She grabbed her phone and called Patricia Hayes, her assistant of 15 years. "Patricia, I need you to find out everything about our night janitor. Everything." The personnel file arrived on Victoria's desk at 7 the next morning. Marcus Webb, age 34, hired 18 months ago for the night cleaning crew. Emergency contact, Ethan Webb, age 7, son. Previous employment, Johns Hopkins Hospital. Position, cardiothoracic surgeon. Victoria read the words 3 times. Then she read them again. A heart surgeon, one of the most demanding specialties in medicine, a profession that required over a decade of training, nerves of steel, and a mind sharp enough to make life or death decisions in seconds. And he was mopping floors in her building. She found Richard Porter in the executive lounge. At 68, Richard was the last remaining founder of Caldwell Financial. He had built the company from a garage in 1985 and now served as chairman emeritus, a wise presence who watched from the shadows and spoke only when it mattered. Richard, have you ever met someone who gave up everything and you cannot understand why? He set down his coffee cup. Victoria, everyone has a reason for their choices. The question is whether you are curious about the janitor or curious about yourself. She did not answer. That night she waited. At 11:15, the cleaning cart rattled down the hallway. Marcus Webb entered her office with the same quiet efficiency as before. He did not seem surprised to find her there. I know who you were, Victoria said. Dr. Marcus Webb, Johns Hopkins. You were one of the top cardiothoracic surgeons in the country. He continued, wiping down her conference table. Was. Past tense. Why are you here? He stopped, set down the cloth, turned to face her with eyes that held depths she had not expected. Because my son needs a father more than the world needs another surgeon. The words hung in the air like smoke. Victoria waited. Marcus leaned against the conference table, his gaze drifting to the window and the city lights beyond. Her name was Sophie, my wife. She was a nurse at Hopkins. That is how we met. She had this laugh that could fill an entire room, and she loved our son more than anything in the world. He paused. The silence stretched. Ethan was born premature. At just 32 weeks, the doctor said he was lucky to survive, but the early birth affected his development. His left leg never formed properly. He has worn a brace since he was 2 years old. Victoria thought of her own daughter, born healthy and whole, and felt a wave of gratitude she had never stopped to appreciate. 3 years ago, Sophie was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive, fast-moving, the kind that does not wait for insurance companies to make decisions. His voice remained steady, but his hands gripped the edge of the table. There was an experimental immunotherapy. Clinical trials showed 70% success rates. It could have saved her, but our insurance denied coverage. Not approved, they said. Too experimental, too expensive. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. I spent $350,000 from our savings. I borrowed another $180,000. I sold our house, our cars, everything, and Sophie still died. 14 months of fighting, and she still died. I am sorry, Victoria whispered. That is not the worst part. Marcus turned to face her. After she was gone, I discovered that the hospital had delayed her initial diagnosis by 6 months. A clerical error, they called it. 6 months that could have meant everything. 6 months that could have saved her life. You sued them. I tried. Johns Hopkins has lawyers that make your legal team look like law students. They buried me. And when I kept pushing, they found a way to revoke my medical license. Emotional instability, they claimed. Unfit to practice. He laughed bitterly. I spent 12 years saving lives. And when I needed the system to save my wife, it let her die for money. Victoria thought of Daniel, her husband who collapsed on a golf course 5 years ago, the paramedics who arrived too late, the hospital bills that meant nothing because he was already gone. So you became a janitor. I became a father, Marcus corrected. Ethan was 4 when Sophie died. He stopped talking for 3 months. He had nightmares every night. He needed me, not some absent surgeon who worked 80 hours a week. He gestured at his uniform. This job pays enough. The night shift means I can be there when he wakes up. Take him to school. Help with his homework. He has already lost his mother. I will not let him lose his father to a career. Victoria stared at this man who had sacrificed everything not out of weakness, but out of love. You did not give up your career, she said slowly. You chose your son. Yes, What would you have chosen, Mrs. Caldwell? The question struck like a blade. She thought of Emily's text message, the birthday dinner she missed, the 25 years of phone calls she never returned because meetings ran late, the marriage that survived on autopilot until Daniel's heart simply stopped trying. She had no answer. Marcus invited her to meet Ethan on a Saturday afternoon. His apartment was small, a one-bedroom unit in Southside Chicago, in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and the paint peeled from the buildings. But inside it was warm, clean, filled with children's drawings taped to every wall. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his small legs dangling from a chair too tall for him, a metal brace wrapped around his left leg, a constant companion since toddlerhood. His hair was the same dark shade as his father's, and his eyes held that peculiar brightness of children who see the world differently than everyone else. He was drawing shapes, complex shapes, circles divided into perfect thirds, spirals that followed mathematical progressions, patterns that seemed far too sophisticated for a 7-year-old. Are you my dad's boss? Ethan asked without looking up. No, honey. Your dad does not work for me. Good, he continued drawing. Because daddy says bosses make people work so much they forget to hug their kids. Victoria felt the words like a physical blow. She watched Ethan draw. The patterns grew more complex. Fractals emerged from his small fingers. Fibonacci sequences spiraled across the page. And mathematical relationships took visual form in ways that defied explanation. Daddy says my brain sees numbers like colors, Ethan said casually. Is that weird? Marcus appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee. The doctors call it synesthesia. His senses overlap in unusual ways. When he looks at equations, he sees colors and patterns that most people cannot perceive. He is gifted. He is my son. Marcus handed her a cup. Gifted or not, I want him to have a childhood. To play, to make friends, to be a kid. The world will demand enough from him soon enough. Ethan looked up from his drawing. Mrs. Victoria, do you have kids? A daughter, Emily, she is 28. Do you hug her a lot? The question broke something inside her. 28 years of birthday cards mailed instead of delivered. 28 years of conversations cut short by conference calls. 28 years of choosing the company over everything else. Not as much as I should. Ethan slid off his chair. His leg brace clicked softly against the floor as he walked to her. And then, without hesitation, he wrapped his small arms around her waist. It is okay, he said. I can share my dad's hugs with you. Victoria held this child she barely knew and felt tears burning in her eyes for the first time in 5 years. 2 weeks before the IPO, Victoria's world collapsed. The call came at 6 in the morning. Patricia's voice shook with barely controlled panic. Vic, the SEC is launching an investigation. Someone leaked confidential information to our competitors, and there is evidence pointing to insider trading. Victoria was in her office within the hour. The building buzzed with chaos. Lawyers filled the conference rooms. Board members demanded answers. And the stock price plummeted 15% before the markets even opened. Derek Simmons, the chief financial officer, called an emergency board meeting. Victoria had always found something unsettling about Derek. He was 45, ambitious, and smiled too easily. He had joined the company 8 years ago and risen through the ranks with a ruthlessness that bordered on predatory. The boardroom fell silent as she entered. Derek stood at the head of the table. 12 directors watched with expressions ranging from concern to suspicion. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek began, I have conducted a thorough internal investigation. The evidence is clear. The leak came from the highest level of this organization. He pressed a button. The screen behind him filled with emails, transaction records, and account statements. Victoria Caldwell has been selling company secrets for the past 6 months. The room erupted. Victoria stared at the screen. The documents looked authentic. The email addresses matched her accounts. The transactions traced to offshore accounts she had never heard of. "This is fabricated," she said. "I have never seen any of this." Derek's smile widened. "That is exactly what someone in your position would say." Richard Porter rose from his chair. "Derek, this is a serious accusation. We need time to verify this evidence." "With respect, Richard, the SEC does not have time. The IPO is in 2 weeks. We need decisive action." Derek turned to the board. "I move for immediate suspension of the CEO pending investigation." The vote was 7-5. Victoria walked out of the building that had been her second home for 25 years. Security escorted her to the door. Employees who had smiled at her yesterday now avoided her gaze. She sat in her car for an hour, unable to drive. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I heard what happened. You are not alone. Marcus." Then another buzz, this time from Emily. "Mom, I saw the news. What is happening? Are you okay? Call me." Victoria stared at her daughter's message. For the first time in years, Emily had reached out first. It took losing everything for her daughter to remember she existed. She drove to Marcus's apartment. Marcus opened the door and found her standing in the hallway. Mascara streaked, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He did not ask questions. He simply stepped aside and let her in. Ethan was already asleep. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Victoria collapsed onto the worn couch. "He set me up. Derek set me up, and I do not know how to prove it." Marcus sat beside her. "Tell me everything." She did. Every detail. The discrepancy in the financials, the SEC investigation, the fabricated evidence. When she finished, Marcus was silent for a long moment. "The $12 million discrepancy I found that first night," he said slowly. "I think it is connected." "What do you mean?" "In medicine, we call it differential diagnosis. You look at what does not fit, the anomalies. That is where the truth hides." He leaned forward. "Derek created fake evidence against you, but creating fake transactions leaves traces, patterns. And patterns can be found." "How?" "I need to look at your company's raw financial data. Everything. Not the reports, but the actual transaction logs." "That is impossible. I am suspended. I cannot access anything." Marcus smiled grimly. "You cannot. But the janitor who cleans the server room every night has access to everything." Richard Porter arrived at Marcus's apartment 2 hours later. At 68, Richard had seen every form of corporate treachery. He had built Caldwell Financial from nothing and survived hostile takeovers, market crashes, and betrayals that would have destroyed lesser men. "So the janitor is actually a surgeon," Richard said, settling into a kitchen chair. "And now he is going to save our company." "I am going to find the truth," Marcus corrected. "What happens after that is up to you." Patricia Hayes joined them at midnight. She brought a laptop loaded with transaction records she had copied before Derek locked everyone out. For 6 hours they worked. Marcus applied the same analytical rigor he had used in operating rooms. He looked for patterns, inconsistencies, and anomalies. He traced financial flows like blood vessels, following them to their source. At 3 in the morning, Ethan wandered out of his bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy, why are all these people here?" "We are helping Mrs. Victoria with a problem, buddy. Go back to sleep." But Ethan did not go back to sleep. He climbed onto a chair and looked at the spreadsheets on Patricia's laptop, his small brow furrowed. "Daddy, these numbers make a pattern." Marcus turned. "What do you mean?" Ethan pointed at a column of transaction timestamps. "They are like a song that keeps repeating. See? This number comes, then this one, then this one. Over and over. But the pattern is hiding because the other numbers are in the way." Marcus leaned closer. He followed Ethan's finger across the screen. The child was right. Every fraudulent transaction Derek had created occurred exactly 3.7 seconds after a legitimate transaction. The timing was too precise to be human. It was automated, and automated systems left digital fingerprints. "Richard," Marcus said quietly, "I think we just found our proof." Victoria looked at Ethan, the 7-year-old boy in pajamas who had just outsmarted an entire corporate fraud scheme. "How did you see that?" she whispered. Ethan shrugged, already yawning. "The bad numbers are all the same color. Red. The good numbers are blue." Richard laughed, a deep rumble that filled the small apartment. "This kid just saved a $2 billion company, and he does not even know it." The emergency board meeting was called for 10 o'clock the following morning. Derek Simmons sat at the head of the table, confident in his victory. The directors filed in, already convinced of Victoria's guilt. The SEC representatives waited in the hallway, ready to formalize charges. The door opened. Victoria walked in. Marcus followed behind her. Derek's smile faltered. "You are not supposed to be here." "Security." Richard Porter rose from his seat. His voice carried the weight of 40 years of authority. "Sit down, Derek. Let them speak." The guards hesitated. Richard's words still carried power in this building. Victoria stepped aside. "I believe everyone knows our night janitor, Marcus Webb. What you may not know is that Dr. Webb was formerly the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Johns Hopkins Medical Center." Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus connected his laptop to the presentation screen. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. The same composure that had guided him through hundreds of surgeries now guided him through the most important presentation of his life. "In medicine, we learn to look for anomalies, things that do not fit. Mr. Simmons created an elaborate fraud designed to frame Mrs. Caldwell and seize control of this company. But he made one mistake. The screen filled with transaction data. Every fabricated transaction in this data set occurs exactly 3.7 seconds after a legitimate transaction. That timing is not human. It is algorithmic. Mr. Simmons used automated software to generate fake records." Derek's face went pale. "Automated software leaves digital signatures, IP addresses, access logs. When we traced those signatures, they led directly to Mr. Simmons' personal computer." Marcus clicked to the next slide. Bank account records, wire transfers, communications with Caldwell Financial's primary competitor. Mr. Simmons has been selling company secrets for 3 years. Not 6 months. 3 years. The $12 million discrepancy that started this investigation was not an error. It was his payment for betraying this company. Derek stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You are going to believe a janitor over your CFO?" "I believe the evidence," Richard said calmly. "And the FBI agents waiting in the hallway believe it too." The door opened. 2 federal agents entered. Derek's composure finally shattered. "This is impossible. How did you—" "A janitor?" Marcus met his gaze. "I was never just a janitor, Mr. Simmons. I was a father protecting his family. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay invisible until the right moment." The agents led Derek away in handcuffs. The boardroom sat in stunned silence. Richard Porter cleared his throat. "I move to immediately reinstate Victoria Caldwell as Chief Executive Officer. All in favor?" 12 hands rose. Victoria stood at the head of the table she had occupied for 25 years. The company was saved. The IPO would proceed. Everything she had built would survive. But as she looked across the room at Marcus Webb, standing quietly by the door in his janitor's uniform, she realized that none of it mattered as much as she once believed. 3 months later, Victoria stood before her employees for the final time as CEO. The company had completed its IPO successfully. The stock price exceeded all projections. Victoria Caldwell was now worth more on paper than she had ever been in her life, and she was resigning. "For 25 years, I believed that success meant sacrifice. I thought that building something great required giving up everything else. I was wrong." The room was silent. Real success is not measured in stock prices or market caps. Real success is having someone to come home to, someone who knows your name, not your title, someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have accomplished. She looked at Marcus, standing in the back of the room with Ethan beside him. I am stepping down as CEO to pursue a different kind of success. Patricia Hayes, who has been my partner in this company for 15 years, will take my place. I know she will lead you well. The applause was genuine. The tears were real. Victoria walked through the crowd to where Marcus and Ethan waited. She knelt down to the boy's level. Mrs. Victoria, Ethan said, does this mean you can come to my soccer games now? Every single one, sweetheart. They built a life together, not in the penthouse Victoria once called home, but in a modest house in the suburbs with a backyard where Ethan could run, where his leg brace no longer limited him because the surgery Victoria helped arrange had given him freedom he had never known. They created the Sophie Webb Foundation in honor of Marcus's late wife. $50 million to help families facing medical debt, to ensure that no one else would have to choose between bankruptcy and saving the people they loved. Victoria's daughter Emily flew in from New York for the foundation launch. She stood beside her mother, and for the first time in years, they looked at each other without the weight of resentment. I never thought I would see you take a day off, Emily said. I never thought I would have a reason to, Victoria replied. But now I do. Emily glanced at Marcus and Ethan across the room. He seems good for you. They both do. Victoria smiled. They are? And Emily, I am sorry for all the birthdays I missed, for all the calls I never made, for choosing the company over you. Emily's eyes glistened. You are here now. That is what matters. On a Sunday evening 1 year later, they gathered around the dinner table. Victoria and Marcus, Emily and Ethan, 4 people bound not by blood but by choice, by love that found them when they least expected it. Ethan set down his fork. His eyes, still carrying that peculiar brightness, moved between the adults at the table. Mrs. Victoria, he said slowly, can I call you something else? Victoria's heart stopped. What would you like to call me, sweetheart? The boy who had lost his mother 3 years ago, who had taught a powerful CEO how to feel again, who saw the world in colors no one else could see, looked at her with complete trust. Mom, can I call you Mom? Victoria gathered him into her arms. Tears streamed down her face. Across the table, Marcus reached for her hand, and Emily wiped her eyes with her napkin. I would love that more than anything in the world. The city of Chicago never truly sleeps, but in a quiet house in the suburbs, 4 people sat together in the golden light of evening, bound by something stronger than blood or business or the relentless pursuit of success. She had been a CEO who thought she had everything. He had been a surgeon who gave up everything. And together with a 7-year-old boy who saw numbers as colors and taught adults how to love again, they built something neither of them expected. A family, because sometimes the person who saves you is not the one you're looking for. It is the one you never noticed, until you did. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and the power of unexpected love, leave a comment below. Share your own story of finding family in unexpected places. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey. Thank you for staying until the end. Until next time, where love always finds a way.